You're listening to the AmWritingFantasy podcast. In today's publishing landscape, you can reach fans all over the world. Query letters are a thing of the past. You don't even need a literary agent. There is nothing standing in the way of making a living from writing. Join two best-selling authors who have self-published more than 20 books between them. Now, on to the show with your hosts, Autumn Burt and Jasper Schmidt.
Hello, I'm Jasper.
And I'm Autumn.
This is episode 134 of the AmWritingFantasy podcast, and by the time you'll be listening to this, it's going to be the middle of July, but we are actually pre-recording to enable us to take a summer break.
Oh.
And this way you'll still get new podcast episodes, and in the spirit of summer vacation, we decided to do something different today, because we've collected questions from your dear listeners, and in today's episode, we are planning to answer all of those and all the things that you guys want to know. So I'm looking forward to this one, Autumn.
Yes, I love it. And listeners actually were the ones who pointed out that we've done now 134 podcasts, and we've hinted about our books, and we've mentioned we have books, and the theme, when we come on says we've had more than 20 books, but we never actually talk much about our own writing and our own books. So thank you for pointing that out. And we will make up for it in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to talk about our books in the sense that trying to get you interested in reading them at all, but more like your listener questions in terms of what you wanted to know about our own writing journey and those sorts of things. So
absolutely. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, it should be very fun. Now I'm dropping things here as well. Oops.
I've already said I'm having a Monday. You can't have a Monday too, because that'll be a disaster.
Yeah, and you already jinxed the fact that maybe the recording will screw up and all that kind of stuff. So and usually when you say something like that, Autumn, you make me nervous because you have a very bad influence on electronics.
I do. I'm trying not to touch my computer or my microphone or the light I've got going on as we're recording, because I've definitely had a total Monday worth. It's been exciting. I mean, I usually, things in life, I've mentioned I felt like I was cursed, I think January and February, but suddenly it's like something broke and I'm getting like 5 emails about this and 6 emails about that. And it's exciting, but there's a point where I was like, oh, this is fun. This is so neat. And oh my gosh, I'm getting a little nervous. It's a good thing. It is a good thing, but I don't need to break anything.
Yeah, I was joking with you last week. I can't remember if we were recording or if it was off air, but I was joking with you last week that while your husband was away, that how you were going to eat because the fridge would probably break once you touched it.
Probably. It hasn't yet. That I haven't been able to fix, but it's...
So it has broken slightly.
Oh, it has its moments, and...
I knew it.
I just, plus I've got the weather going on today. It's lovely. We're having a very wet spring, and yesterday was gorgeous. We went for a hike up Mount, I can never pronounce it, Wantastiquit, I should say, which is this lovely mountain that's overlooking the Connecticut River and the town we live in. And so we did a lovely hike, and all the mountain laurel are in bloom, and it was sunny and it was warm. And today we woke up to thunderstorms, and it has been pouring all day. And you can see I have this lovely like white selfie light that's just gorgeous. So I'm sitting in the dark waiting for more thunderstorms to roll through. But so far so good. Hopefully things are better for you over there.
It's pretty dark here as well.
Yeah,
you can see that it's quite the people watching on YouTube at least can see it's quite dark here. It's getting late evening here on my end as well. So
no, I don't have that excuse. It's like middle of the afternoon.
Yeah, it's just bad weather then. But But did you have a good week otherwise?
Yes. Otherwise, good. Work has gotten busy. Drawing's gotten busy. I love the hike. My husband came back. That was kind of nice. Had some time together, so that's all good. I love the hike. Feeling it a little bit in my legs today, but that's all right. So is he. So that's good.
Yeah, and now the light went out. Yeah, you touched the light. I knew it.
I did. I should never touch these things.
No.
We'll see. All right. My husband's looking for a...
podcast listeners can't see this, but her light keeps going out. Yeah, it was exactly like I predicted. And now it went out again.
Oh, that's the worst thing that happens. We'll be fine. I'm getting technical assistance because I need it. So let's just talk about you for the moment. How is things in Denmark?
Well, yeah, it's not been good, to be very honest. It was a terrible weekend.
Yeah.
As I mentioned in last week's episode, Denmark was going to play Finland for our first match in the European Soccer Championship. And it was also for the first time ever that Denmark is one of the host nations. So it was like on our home field.
Right.
And I, with COVID going on for so long and everything, we've been waiting for like 1.5 years for this match. And everybody was looking so much forward to it. And also because the tournament structure is in such a way that no two matches are ever played at the same time. So basically everybody in the entire world who likes soccer was able to tune in, right? And then something really terrible happened in that match. And to be honest, it affected me quite a lot over the weekend. And I'll try to do my best to talk a bit about what happened here for those people who maybe don't watch soccer or of course, by the time you listen to this is slightly in the past, so it'll probably be a bit easier to listen to. But I'll try not to get emotional talking about this, but I have to admit that over the weekend I was quite emotional because it was really tough. So normally I try to keep upbeat and nice, tone in these podcasts, but I'm not sure I can manage this section here, but I'll try. Okay. Because I feel like it is important to sort of talk about stuff like this when it happens. So about 40 minutes into this match, one of the Danish players called Christian Eriksen, he suddenly just collapsed on the field of play. And at first, when I saw it, I was sort of wondering what happened because there was no other players near him. There was nobody tackling him or anything like that. So I was sort of like, that looked a bit weird why he's just fell to the ground. And then very soon when the camera sort of found his face, if I could put it like that, they filmed his face, and he had this very lifeless stare in his eyes, and I could instantly see something is very, very wrong here. And his teammates came running. Those nearest to him, of course, knew much more than we could from watching on TV, obviously. But he was, in the beginning, he was just lying there and he was shaking, and then he stopped shaking and didn't move. And then it became quite apparent that he had a cardiac arrest in the middle of the field. So the paramedics came onto the field, and they spent like 20-30 minutes giving him, what is it called in English? Heart massage? I don't know. I read the BBC and I did see a little bit about this, but yeah, they gave him a defibrillator and some CPR. Yeah, CPR, yeah, exactly. And they probably spent like 20-30 minutes doing that, and all the Danish players, his teammates, they sort of formed a circle around him.
Yeah.
And see, this is where it gets a bit tough for me, because it was so powerful images, These people just tried to shield him from the cameras, all the people watching. While he was just basically fighting for his life.
Oh my gosh.
It was tough.
I'm surprised they didn't. I mean, I understand it was. I'm sure it was a live event, but I'm almost surprised that they didn't pan back or give a little more privacy to him at that point.
Yeah, I mean the network I watched it on, they as soon as they noticed what was really happening,
Mm-hmm.
they switched to a camera from a helicopter outside, so just overlooking the city of Copenhagen. But there were other TV stations who filmed the whole thing, which was not on the channel I watched, which I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty happy about that I didn't
Yeah.
see. I really feel that's really terrible, but. Those images of his teammates has just made it around the world since. Um, and on one hand, it makes me really proud the way that it behaved.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, it was also really tough. And I think the worst part was that I need to breathe a bit.
Oh, take your time.
At some point, they brought his wife onto the field.
Oh, jeez. Oh, that's hard.
It was too much.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, she must have been broken down.
Yeah, and then the other TV station they filmed this, and which I was really upset about learning afterwards that they had filmed his wife standing there, obviously completely devastated and thinking that he was dead, because I thought he was dead too at that point.
Yeah.
And our team captain and our goalkeeper went to his wife and tried to console her, which was also really tough. Yeah, this is not good podcast material, I know, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
And I think it was like an hour later, it was then announced that he was alive and he had been taken to the hospital, so that was all good.
Yeah.
And I think as well in good sportsmanship, our Finnish neighbors did a really wonderful job. So they were like chanting his name in the stadium as well.
Oh, that is really good.
Yeah.
I know I had read that they had halted play even after he'd gone off the field until they heard from the hospital that he was at least alive. So I thought that was really,
Yes.
I thought that was decent of, all sides. The players were obviously, and I think I remember reading that some of the Denmark players were not able to continue play. Some of them could, but that there was some players just so affected that they're like, I can't do this today. So it was a huge
No, and that's
thing.
probably where I want to maybe go a bit into what happened there, because that's not so emotional, because I'm upset about that part, which is then easier for me to talk about.
Okay.
Because honestly, I want to move a bit away from all that, because it's too emotional still. I'm even struggling with tears right now as I speak, because it's just too much. But let me move into a bit of a rant, because I can better handle that.
Okay, let's rant now. Let's get that out.
Yeah, because UEFA is the body of authority body who sort of governs the European Soccer Championship.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they stopped the play, as you said, when this happened, and everybody just went to the dressing rooms. And after a while, they stood on the pitch for a long while the treatment was still going on. And then when he was taken to the hospital, they left the pitch. Mm-hmm. And then it proved afterwards that UEFA had given them a choice. Mm-hmm. And UEFA had said, either you can play the rest of the match today, or you can meet again tomorrow at 12 o'clock noon, and you can play then.
Okay.
And this is, to me, is just so freaking unacceptable. For number one, you cannot ask people who've just stood around watching their teammate almost die to make a decision about, do you want to play now or do you want to play tomorrow morning, when you haven't slept all night probably because you're so worried about everything that's happened and you're sort of out of yourself. And even asking the people to make a decision on what's your preference is completely unacceptable. But then, because they had no other choice, the Danish players, the Finnish players were they're wonderful people, very sportsmanship. So they said, whatever the Danish players will do, we'll do. They decide.
That's very nice.
And then, because the Danish player knew that if we go home and don't even sleep and have to get up tomorrow morning early, get back in here, change again, warm up again, we're not going to be able to play. So they decided, if that's our choice, then let's play it, get it over with.
Right.
So they came onto the pitch again, and they played the last 5 minutes of the first half and then the second half. And of course, hats off to those guys for doing that. That's incredible. But it's also shitty because they were not in the game at all. Not at all.
I'm sure you can see that.
It doesn't matter right now. The sports part of it and the results doesn't matter. We did lose 1-0. But again, the header that was headed, it was like straight at our goalkeeper. And our goalkeeper is one of the best. And he fumbled it into the net, clearly not concentrating at all. And then a bit later on in the match, we got a penalty kick, which our striker also was, you could see it in his face, just standing there waiting for the referee to blow the whistle so he could kick. He was standing there looking into the ground like he's somebody who had lost everything almost. And that's not how you stand. When you're about to take a penalty kick, you're ready to fire up because you're going to score now, and you are there, right? And he was not there at all. And he made the weakest kick ever. A 10-year-old could have kicked that ball better. So, and I'm just so upset about the fact that UEFA gave them such a shitty. First of all, the choice is like between two bats, so it's not really a choice. And then secondly, it's sort of forcing them to play when they're not there at all. And this is like the European Championship. You have to be at your best.
Yeah,
and then we are forced to play. And oh fuck, I don't know. I'm just so upset about it.
No, it is. I wonder if they will rethink any of their rules after this, because I've been paying attention to the French Open where, a major player withdrew because she said her mental health, they weren't supporting her. So maybe something different will come out of this as well, because those are, they should have been given like a week, which I understand they're playoffs and things are happening and there's a timeline, but they need
but timelines can never be more important than human life.
No, exactly.
I think the only decent thing UEFA could have done would have been, as an authority, they make a decision right there on the spot to say, everybody go home. Don't worry about it. Just go home. And then send everybody back home. And then the day after, UEFA could contact the teams and then say, okay, let's figure out when can we play a match in the coming days. That would have been the only humane way of doing that. It is not okay to ask people who are in a crisis and in shock to make a decision about two shitty options.
Yeah, no, somebody who was not emotionally and mentally involved in that should have been the one to be the adult and say, hey, this is what we're going to do to help people out.
Yeah. And just say, go home.
Yeah.
Go home, right? We'll talk about it tomorrow.
That's what a real parent would have done. Would have been, hey, you know what? Don't worry about the game. Everyone go home and take care of yourself and hug your wife.
Yeah. So, well, this was much tougher to get through than I even thought. So, sorry about that, listeners. But I don't know. I just felt it was important to talk about something when it really impacted me quite a lot over the last couple of days. So, I
can tell.
Maybe we should just move on to something else now.
All right. If you're ready, only if you're ready, we will continue on.
A week on the internet with the AmWritingFantasy podcast.
Okay, let's get back to some business here, and I can stop all my struggling with crying and not. So I was writing a post for. Yes, I do. I was writing a post for our Patreon supporters about the issue of discoverability on online platforms like Amazon, because that is really our greatest challenge in today's publishing landscape, as I see it.
Yes, I agree. And I wrote something very, very similar for today's release, which, of course, today being a month ago when this is released, but
Yes.
also on discoverability, but talking a little bit about Vela and some pros and cons to that as well, and maybe some tips on how to use it for discoverability. So that's definitely something we seem to be doing on Patreon recently.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also talk more about discoverability in our free self-publishing success course. So
Right.
if you want, you can go to www.amwritingfantasy.com and you can get the hands on the free course there. But I did learn a few things while writing this Patreon post, and I
Ooh,
thought maybe I could just share.
that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, well, technically, okay, this first one I was aware of already, but I still think it was quite important, at least as a reminder, maybe if other people were aware as well. But the price at which you sell your books actually plays a huge role in the book and in how the book will show up in searches on
Okay.
Amazon, for example. So, for example, uh, I was linking to some material in the post that shows sort of the behind the scenes of how I'm reaching this conclusion, but I'm not going to go there. That the Patreon supporters can read that stuff. But
Okay.
just as the conclusion is that, for example, if you take a book selling 10 copies a day at $6.99 in a search, that will rank significantly higher than a book selling 10 copies at $1.99.
Really?
So the same amount of copies sold, but the one with the higher price will rank significantly higher. I didn't know that already, but I think it's a good reminder of that it doesn't matter what you're selling the price, what price you're setting.
Okay. So
So I thought, for one, that's quite important.
that is important. That is a good tip.
Yeah, and then the other part, which was also very interesting, was that it showed that the percentage of people who buy the book after seeing it in a search for that keyword, the keyword they search. So let's say they searched for epic fantasy and the book showed up, they clicked it and bought it.
Okay.
The people who actually do that matters a lot more than you might think. Because the more people that buy the book after finding it through a specific search will make Amazon position the book much, much higher in the search results.
Oh,
Which, of course, then will make you sell a lot more books.
that would really help selling books. That's interesting.
Yeah,
There's
so
no
that means
way.
that...
There's no way of faking that one either. So it's not something you have to. It helps to have good keywords then, so that people will link and it fits your book until when they find it, they buy it, and then it'll elevate the book.
Yeah, but where I really find this one interesting is it's about several things. It's about the keywords, like you say, that the keywords you use are related to what the book is about, but it's also about the book cover and the book description, because when they search, let's say, epic fantasy, let's say your book shows up in that because you have some good keywords and so on. But if your book cover is not signaling to the reader that this is epic fantasy, and if the book description don't clearly show that this is epic fantasy and this is what this book is about, the things that you normally associate with epic fantasy, then they won't buy it. And the more times people will ignore it, then the more Amazon will move it down the list.
Right.
Yeah. So
okay.
I think it speaks a lot about a lot of the things we've talked about over and over again, but how all the different elements like covers, book title, keywords, book description, it all links together and everything has to work towards the same goal.
That's
and if
true.
it does, then it'll help you significantly in the ranking. And I think that's very good to always keep in mind.
Yes, that is very good. It really, it is a combination of everything. So it's like you really need to be strong, at least moderately strong in everything. They all have to tie together to a whole that will be stronger than all the individual parts, and hopefully you'll rank better that way.
Yeah. I mean, there are more details in that post for our Patreon supporters, but I think, honestly, the more time I spend looking into book marketing and all those topics, the more convinced I become that ranking is the single most important element when it comes to the success of a book, because you can put Facebook ads, Amazon ads, all that behind it. But if you can make the ranking work for you, it's 100 million times easier than trying to come up with new Facebook ads to push some sales.
That's very true.
So,
Or remembering to go, tweak your AMS ads or find new targeting books and words. So, yeah, that's a very good point. And a good reminder to look over your blurbs, look over your book cover, look over your keywords, get everything going together and move your book up a little bit organically.
Yeah, indeed. Yes, exactly. So at any rate, if you, dear listener, also want access to these kind of posts and much more, then you could consider supporting the Am Writing Fantasy podcast. We try to give you a lot of things in return.
Yes.
And you will, of course, also help to keep the lights on here. So this podcast, for example, is completely free. So it is entirely funded by our wonderful Patreon supporters. So
yes.
There's a link in the show notes.
And I think that's not very fair that you mentioned keeping the lights on, since mine went off like 3 times before I got my guru's technical assistance to fix it. So
that's why we need some supporters, because the light keeps going off.
It does on my end.
And
on to today's topic.
Yeah, so I have collected all the questions, Autumn.
I'm so glad you did, because it's a Monday, and I showed up, and my light went out.
You showed up. That's actually a success in itself.
Some Mondays it is, and I think listeners will agree with me. There are some Mondays that just showing up should get you a reward for the day.
Yes, indeed. So maybe the simplest thing would be that I just sort of read them out, and then we answer them one by one. Maybe that's the easiest way to do this.
I think that sounds swell.
Okay, and there is no significant order in this. It's just the questions, and the questions are the way we got them. So we're just gonna answer whatever the listeners want to know. And that
sounds good. Sounds lovely.
So the first question is: have you tried other genres than fantasy?
Ooh, do you want me to start with this one?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So yes, definitely, I have. I have written post-apocalyptic. I've written epic fantasy, urban fantasy, dark fantasy, and I've done nonfiction. I know, but it's still different veins of it. I kind of sometimes think about, not romance, but maybe a cozy mystery or something, because I did grow up with Nancy Drew, and my best friend loved Nancy Drew. So I've definitely had that kind of, I love that problem, like your Sherlock Holmes. I love that kind of sleuthing and clues, especially writing a plot like that, I think would be a fun challenge. But I haven't written one yet. So mostly post-apocalyptic / dystopian, and of course nonfiction with both you and with my husband. So those count too. And some real life travel writing sagas as well.
Yeah, well, for me, the only other genre, I guess nonfiction is a genre, but that's the only other thing I've written. I've written, some with Autumn, some of my own nonfiction. I did the fantasy mapmaking book. I did one on how to write fantasy book descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, I did one on Twitter marketing as well. I since unpublished that one because it's Twitter changed the rules and the entire book sort of became obsolete. So thank you very much, Twitter, or maybe stupid me for writing a book where the algorithms might change 2 months later. But there you go.
You live and learn. And I mean, I know you, and I know you had this huge file on world building notes, and I know you must have other notes, like just stacks of ideas of things to write as well. If they're physical, they would be stacks. But yes, I bet you have some folders of other ideas you've got in there.
Probably. But I have no plans to write more nonfiction books at any foreseeable future, to be honest. But
that's not true. We're actually slowly, because it's on me to do it. I've been trying to consolidate all of our blog posts and things into a cohesive whole. Yeah, see, we're working on one now. We just
that's true. But that's true. But I guess I don't think about it as writing one, because it's more consolidating stuff we already have and putting it in one place. But technically you're right. Yeah. Okay, so next question is: have you both ever met in real life?
No, not yet. That's what's so COVID. That's all I'm saying is COVID and bad timing on trips. I've made it since we've started working together, I've made it to London, and we were so close, but I was with in-laws and it was it was complicated. It was a very complicated to sneak away, so it didn't happen.
That's
And
a
then-
diplomatic.
Yeah. I know my mother-in-law doesn't listen to this, so I'm not too worried, but I will still be diplomatic. And then my parents were actually going to go and do a Norwegian cruise, and I was like, Copenhagen, we're going to swing through, and I'm going to stay, or I'm going to come early. And COVID! So,
Yeah.
not yet. Soon.
Not yet. Soon. Yeah. Well, we do have. I can't remember now if we talked about it last week on last week's episode or not, but we do have some plans on trying to, if COVID will allow,
Yes.
we have some plans on trying to put like an AmWritingFantasy getaway together in 2022.
Yes.
So the weird thing would be that that's probably going to first time we meet in person as well, I guess.
It could be,
But,
unless something else happens. But at least we have actually Zoom meet the extended families. So
yeah, we do. Yeah.
we have done that. So that
Yeah.
was that's so fun. I got to see your kids. It's so cute.
Yeah. So, but yeah, meeting in real life, yeah, it's incredible to think about because we've done so many podcast episodes. We've done courses together. We've written nonfiction fiction books, all of that over several years, and we haven't even met in person. That's insane.
Know. It is insane, and we've got to fix that hopefully soon. And you and my husband already pick on me like totally like you're on the same page, which is I just can't wait for real life.
Yeah, it's only gonna get better, Autumn.
Absolutely. I will touch things and break them. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I need to store things away before you come here.
Oh, let me hold your phone.
Yeah, no. All technical stuff goes into the closet with a padlock on it.
I have to see your terabyte computer. No, I really do.
No.
All right.
Okay, next question. Which comes first, story idea or new world concepts?
Oh, I think for me, story idea. But every once in a while, and I know you do too, but every once in a while you come up with a story, something part of a world to me. And I'm like, I've got to include that. I got to find a world for it. But I think to me, character is almost before story idea. Like I'll come up with a scene and I don't know much else, but I feel this draw to a character and then the story starts developing. So character, story, world for me.
Yeah, same for me. Story ideas definitely before world, but I would have responded exactly like you did, Autumn. So let's just move on to the next one.
It's probably why we're working together. So hey, go figure.
Okay, next one. Have you read all of each other's books?
Oh, that's a mean question for you.
That's too many books.
That's so funny. No, she writes too much. That's so funny. Oh no, I have all your books because I format all your books and actually help with the covers now. But so I've read bits and pieces because I've been formatting them. But except for what we've written together, I haven't finished your Keystone Bone trilogy, which I should one of these days.
I read Born of Water.
Yeah, which is like my worst one.
Yeah, but that's exactly how I feel about that as well. So you don't have to read it. That's fine.
That's fine. I trust you with our new stuff, right?
Well, yeah. Well, we read the stuff we write when we write it together anyway. So
yes, we do.
I guess that counts.
I think that counts.
Yeah. So answer is no.
No.
We have not.
No, because I write too much for him.
Yeah, you do. I'm not going to read 20 books or something.
You're a slow reader. You have to admit. So if you read like a book a day, you'd probably be all set. But you say you take a little bit longer. So that's fair.
Yeah, I'm a very slow reader. Yeah.
All
so.
right.
Yeah. Okay, what got you started with writing?
Oh, that's a good one. So, you know this story, obviously, I guess, and we've mentioned it on podcasts, but I always liked writing. I always was drawn to reading. And I did actually win a contest in my high school in my senior year on writing, which I just kind of always forget about. But I didn't take it seriously. I was big into art. I was studying studio art, actually, and English in college. But it was outside of that, when I was working on my master's, that I started writing. I'd get bored in class, and I'd flip to the back of the notebook, and I would start writing stories down instead of taking notes. And eventually my husband actually found one of those, and he read it, and he's like, "You wrote this? This is good. You should keep writing." And so I kept writing, and I did some adult ed classes thinking I would do the query letters and a publisher, and I did try all that. But then my husband gave me an article on a government employee who was in a similar vein that I did, and she did self-publishing, and he's like, "You should try this." And I think he gave that to me in early December, and in February of 2012, I published Born of Water.
Yeah, and I don't want to cheat in answering this one, but maybe I'll do the short version, because actually, if you go back to episode 128, we listed a number of interviews we just did, and on all of those interviews, we were asked this question. So I felt like we answered it like at least 5 different places now.
We have,
but maybe the very short version was that I had an idea that maybe one day when I would retire, then I would write something. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I had that idea, but that's sort of always, or for a very long time, sat with me, that thought. But then during summer vacations, we always go to Finland, and we go to the sauna, and there's just peace and quietness there, and no stressful day-to-day activities or anything like that. So, and then I just started thinking, why is it that I have an idea in my head that I should sort of postpone things until I get retired? Why couldn't I just start writing? Mm-hmm. Even if it's just a little every day, just, I could just start. And then I sort of thought, why not? So next day I started, and I haven't stopped since. Yay. It was some awful beep, what I wrote, but and it got deleted, and I don't even have it anymore, but I started.
Because I think I wrote a trilogy before I released my epic fantasy trilogy, and my mom, of course, loves it, but it is not published. I think I broke every single writing rule the ones you should follow in the first 5 pages. I've tried to edit it, and I'm like, it's just. But I do think I still have the digital files somewhere stored somewhere.
Unless you've broken them, Autumn, with your Fey influence.
Yeah, they're probably corrupted. But
yeah, corrupted file is what it's going to say when you try to open it.
Probably.
Okay, what made you decide to co-write a fictional book?
Oh. Why did we decide to co-write?
I can answer if you don't know.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, well, we created a world together, and we had to do something with it. I think it's your fault.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it was my fault, actually. I don't know. But I think it was mostly from a pure business point of view, meaning that co-writing fictional books would, of course, allow us to write more books and faster.
Yes.
And I think it was purely from a financial and efficiency point of view that we decided, why don't we try to start doing this? Because at the point in time when we decided to start co-writing fictional books, we had already done so many other things together. So we knew that we were able to work together, and we knew that we could, that our ways of thinking, if you want to call it that, aligns.
Yes.
So it wasn't really that big of a leap at that point to say, why don't we just start writing some fictional stuff as well? We did test the waters a bit with a short story first, just to see will this work or not? And it worked fine. So we just continued.
Yes.
But I think that is basically why. It is mostly business decision or more than anything else.
Yes. And it helps that we're friends. So that even if we haven't met in person. Yes. I think it's worked out very well, though. I'm finishing up my last independently written book. So once that's done and off my plate, then it'll just be ours, and who knows, maybe a little Vela story here or there if I feel like I need to dabble. But yeah, it is really exciting. I cannot wait to release this trilogy.
No, indeed. Yeah. Okay, next question is, what tropes were you determined to avoid?
Oh, I forgot about this question. Yeah, you start on this one. Let me think.
Okay, you can think while I can at least give you 2 tropes that we definitely wanted to avoid.
Oh, yes.
One was having way too powerful of a character
Yes.
because that happens not all the time, but it happens fairly frequent in some epic fantasy stories. And when the character is just too powerful, the story also loses a lot of its tension. So we definitely wanted to not do that trope. And the other trope that we really wanted to avoid was also we did want to include some of the more traditional fantasy races like elves and dwarves, but we wanted to avoid your typical version of those races. So we have elves and we have dwarves, but ours are, should we just say, significantly different?
Yes, I think that's a very fair way of putting it. Yeah. I love our differences. They're incredibly interesting. So I definitely think those were the main tropes. I mean, we also knew we wanted to stay out of like fantasy romance. So it's not really, it's more of a subplot than a trope, but it's there.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah. There is a bit of romance in the story as well, because I think there always should be.
Yeah.
But that's my personal point of view. But a lot of readers like at least a subplot with some romance. So we do have that in our stories as well. But But can you think of something else, or should we move to the next question?
I'm trying to think, because I mean, there's nothing, because the world is so big and we want to write so many different stories, I would say, except for like not having this overwhelming power, but we might end up with some powerful characters, but I think there's always going to be counterpoints and tension. I think almost everything is on the table, except for bad writing. So I think we're also I mean, we're
hopefully
exploring...
bad writing is not a trope.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope not.
For the next series that we want to work on, we're exploring something that we're even having a hard time finding examples of. So I think we're just gonna do some
pirates.
Don't tell people we're doing fantasy pirates. I know, it's gonna be so cool. But yeah, so I would say there's not much that we could not find some way of going, oh, that's a horrible idea, but if we did this, we could turn it on its head. So I think anything's going.
Sure. Okay, next question. How long did it take you to fully complete your first novel?
Oh, that's mean. I take it they want the first one that we actually published is correct.
Yeah, probably.
I like to say that Born of Water, I think, took me 3 to 5 years.
Ooh.
I do. I started it, then I ended up handwriting a story that became the whole series of Friends of My Enemy, and then I went back to Born of Water and worked on it again. I ended up rewriting it 3 times, because the first time was just typical fantasy tropes. It was boring, and I knew it could be so much better. And then so I rewrote it, and then the second time after that, so the final time I rewrote it, the third time, was I just thought the characters weren't jiving and fitting. I had so much to learn, even with an English degree and writing classes and creative writing classes and adult ed classes. It just had so much learning to do. And I still look back at it and go, oh God, I had so much learning to do. But yeah, it took a long time. But then Rule of Fire was a year. Spirit of Life was like 9 months. And when I did Friends of My Enemy, I did 4.5 books in a year. So I got faster and better. Definitely better.
Definitely better, yes. Luckily enough, that how it goes.
Yes, it is. Very much so.
Yeah. I think my first book was 1.5 years, I think.
Oh, that's not bad.
No, but it's not quick. I mean, I know, well, all of this is relative. One person's quick is another person's slow. So, yes. Yeah. But 1.5 years, I think, for the first book. And then book number 2 took me maybe half a year, a bit more than half a year. Same for book 3. So,
that's not bad.
And nowadays, I think, we're down to like 4 months, 3-4 months.
I think combined, I mean, each of my books in the Tainted Face series, which is the last one I'm releasing on my own, I was writing a book in 2.5 months, and those were 80 to 90,000 words. I think the last one is a little bit longer, and that took a little bit longer. But yeah, and then editing, of course. So it usually takes me a month to edit. So 3.5 months for a complete book. That's I think I've gotten better.
Yeah. Okay, this one is interesting.
Oh,
It says, "What are your ambitions?"
dear. Is that on writing or is it personal?
It just says, "What are your ambitions?"
Uh,
I'm of course reading as part of the author career. That's at least how I
okay.
read it. But
All right. I was gonna say I know my ambition as a young girl, and still I would love to be the first botanist on another planet because that would be freaking cool. um, so barring that, because I'm probably not going to be the first botanist on another planet unless I trip into a wormhole and end up there on my own. Writing wise, I definitely. I don't. That's weird because I can actually say, of course, I want to sell more books. I want more readers. I would love to be as big as maybe Neil Gaiman or George R. R. Martin, but I do it because I love it as well. So I'm really happy. I've got to over 20 books. I have to think about this one. What's your ambition at this point, besides maybe selling more and writing more?
yeah, that's why I think it's a good question because
Yeah,
the more you think about it, the more layers there is to it. I mean,
definitely.
I would like to. I would like to earn like a very healthy living from writing. That would be awesome, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I would really love to see our own fantasy world come to life on a TV series like on Amazon or Netflix or
Netflix,
something. That would
yeah.
just be awesome. I
That would
would
be
love
really
that.
brilliant.
But so I guess that's an ambition.
That is an ambition. I have to say, I think it would be really cool to be well known enough that like the release of maybe the last book of a series was almost like an event. And if that was ever the case, I would love to have on like other indie authors, like have them do readings of their stories while we're waiting for my book's release, because that would just be such a cool way to
Oh,
support the
cool.
indie
Yeah.
community, to
Pay it forward.
introduce them. Yeah, introduce
Yeah.
them to other new writers. And even to have other writers, I mean, we want other writers to hopefully write in our world. And I've thought about the Tainted Fae is kind of set up the same way, where it could go into places where I can't write it. So if someone else wanted to pick it up, that would be really, really swell to have kind of a world where people are like, I want to write with you. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah. Okay, what are your favorite authors, fantasy or otherwise, that particularly resonate with your style or have influenced you?
Oh. You don't want to start with this one?
That's a tough one.
It is a tough one. Well, I can say, obviously, you know this, that Anne Mccaffrey is the author who had introduced me to fantasy writing. So I've recently gone back and reread the first full book of hers, Dragonflight. That's the one that I read first, and I read it, and it's not that the writing isn't good. The writing's good, but the themes, what's allowed the main hero, literally the heroine is afraid of him at times. He shakes her and it's supposed to be love, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's dating. If I had a 13-year-old, yeah, it's like if I had a 13-year-old girl, we would be sitting down and talking about why this is inappropriate and how it's changed, and this is never a way you should be treated by someone who loves you. So I was really shocked, but I want to go back. Mercedes Lackey, I know, changed my views on a lot of things. She's a very liberal writer. She's a very good writer. I want to go back and reread like her Voldemar series, Herald Mages and stuff, and I want to read just a couple of those to see if they're as good as I remember as well. And of course, Margaret Rice and Tracy Hickman were in there. And there's a few in there. My favorite book is actually called The Woodwife by Terry Windling, which is odd because it is more, it's not even urban fantasy. It takes part in the desert, but the secret of this book is that it was inspired by my favorite artist, who is Brian Froud. So if no one has watched, like Labyrinth and all Dark Crystal, all those things are puppets. He and his wife created the Frouds. He is absolutely, I got to see his work in person when I spent my year in England. I went to one of his viewings and I got to see Brian Froud original paintings. It was fantastic. And there was a series of 4 books written based on his paintings, and I have all 4 of them. And The Wood Wife, which is the third one based on his paintings, is one of my favorite ever.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
That's a much better answer than I can come up with, I think. But I'm with you on Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman. Of course, the Dragonlance stories were the ones that introduced me to fantasy when I was a kid. And
did you read Star of Guardians? That was also by them. It's more of a space opera. I highly recommend that. Not to interrupt, but you should read that one too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I actually bought just like a month ago. I bought all the Dragonlance books, so they're on my Kindle, and I will read them all again.
That's awesome.
So yeah. Other than that, I would say probably Anne Rice.
Oh yeah.
And because I have tried to read some of Anne Rice's books that are not the Vampire Chronicles, but those are really not my favorite. Some of them, it feels, I don't know if that's just coincidence, but I think there's a lot of like religion stuff in her other books, and nothing against religion. People can write and read what they want, but it's just not quite kind of my cup of tea. But the vampire stories, like Interview with the Vampire and all those books with Lestat and all that stuff, it's just, I still have this vivid memory of reading through these books and just the whole mythology she created about how the first vampires came to be and how everything evolved, and all that origin story is just like, oh my God, I loved it. It was just like, it was so well done, and it made perfect sense as well. There was logic to it. So oh my God, I just love that.
Yeah, she was really good at foreshadowing and not having major plot holes, and characters that are just gripping, and storylines that are gripping, and not being afraid of killing things off. So it was, I do love her books as well.
So yeah, that's probably what has had the most influence on me, I think. And it plays into my love for world building, of course.
Yes,
because that's very much to do with world building.
Yes.
Okay, next question. Have you ever started a book that just died in the draft? How did you know it was dead?
I can say yes, because I started writing book 2 to Black Throne, Black Blood, which the first book is out as a novella. And so I started writing the second book, which is to be entitled Ebenru. And I was probably 3 or 4 chapters, and maybe even as far as 5 chapters, which, I mean, we're talking about a novella. So that's, that's a good chunk out of 14 chapters. And I just said, no. I was struggling with it. I was hating the process, and I absolutely love writing. And the funny thing is, I was playing with 2 series at the same time, and I kept thinking about the Tainted Fae. I'd released the first novella of both of them to see which one I wanted to write in. And I finally just said, you know what? I really want to write the Tainted Fae. And I switched to it, and I think I busted out the entire book 1, and like I said, in 2.5 months. So it's not, I don't consider it fully abandoned, because you and I are either talking about picking up that series or that theme, or if we don't, eventually I will finish it, because I don't think I even that series, that my abandoned trilogy that I will never publish, I finished it. So I always kind of finish what I start.
Yeah, and again, same for me. When I start something, I'll usually finish it. So, but technically, I mean, I have had the first book in my Keystone Bone trilogy, for example. What is published is not the same as what I started. So it definitely died in the draft, and I actually deleted 50,000 words and started over. And that hurt a bit at that point in time. But I knew it was dead because it was just organically evolving into a story that was not what I wanted to tell at all. And hence, I sort of learned, maybe it's a good idea to plot.
That's very true.
Yeah. Okay, have you ever released a book that flopped, and what did you learn?
I would say Friends of My Enemy has had a hard life the entire time. Those who have found it have loved it and like given it 5 stars and they adore it. But they're definitely lower, and it is AMS ads. You cannot touch the word like dystopian, post-apocalyptic. It costs more to get clicks on those words because of novels like The Hunger Games. You just can't afford it. It's more than the book is worth, so I don't even market it. But when I read it, it is some of my favorite writing, up to The Tainted Fae. I actually adore The Tainted Fae more than Friends of My Enemy. But I think it's better writing and better characters than my epic fantasy series. So I feel bad for it that it's like my unnoticed story that no one really knows about, and a lot of the fantasy readers are like, oh, I don't read post-apocalyptic because it's like it's near future, it's real world. But it taught me so much. I wouldn't have been able to write The Tainted Fae, which is also, it's urban fantasy, it's real world, it's now. So I wouldn't have been able to do it. It was a great learning experience. I still absolutely adore it. If anything was ever turned into a movie, I think that one would fit very well because the characters are just rock solid awesome. And they still talk to me a lot. So I don't care. I would love it to do better. The people who have read it would love it to do better. The narrator would like it to do better, but I'm 100% still in love with it. I don't care.
And I would say the first book in my Keystone Bone trilogy, Desolation, has definitely not done very well. I mean, it gets downloaded quite well, but that's because it's perma-free. So, but before then, it was very hard to sell any copies of it. And I think because the question also asked what I learned, and I definitely learned 3 different things that, of course, I can mention here so that listeners can take that away and hopefully avoid the mistakes I've made. But number 1 is that the world building is actually very rich in this book and in this series, and it's very well developed. But like you see often in new fantasy authors, in debut novels, and I was like everybody else, so there is way too much info dumping in this book. Way too much non-engaging ways of telling some, history of the world or why things are the way they are and so on, and that's not very good. So there is that. Secondly, I use this book actually as an example in our self-publishing success course to show people what not to do, because the cover on this book is not signaling that this is fantasy, and it's not doing a very good job. And as I say in our course, I use it as an example to show you what not to do. And as I also said in the course, I should really change it, but I never get around to it because there's so many things I need to change in so many places. Because this book has been out for so many years, it's not as simple as just updating the cover on Amazon. I probably have like 200 different tweets scheduled that goes out with it. Then I need to change the image on all of those and on websites and so on. I don't know. It's just too much work, and I really don't feel like it. And on the other hand, it allows me to show in the self-published success course what not to do. So it actually serves a purpose nowadays.
Well, I guess that's fair.
And number 3, last thing I would say as a top 3 things I learned was that your main character really needs to have some sort of personality or something that stands out. Whereas the main character in this book, she definitely has hardship in her life because I'm always mean to characters, so there is that. So she does not have an easy time at all, but she's not distinct enough. There's something missing in terms of making her more special. So that's also something I learned. I learned a lot more about character development since I wrote that first book, but that's how it goes. Like Autumn said before, the more we write, the more we learn, and we all have to start somewhere. And usually when we look back at our own first books years later, we always cringe. Autumn doesn't like her first book. I don't like my first book, and I think most authors feel the same.
Yes.
But
it
doesn't mean that it's a bad story at all. It's a good story, but it's just I could have written it a lot better nowadays if I did it now. But so is life.
That's very true. Yeah, Born of Water would be so different if I wrote it now. But hey, I'm not going to go back and rewrite it because that's like 20 some books ago.
Yeah. So we have 2 questions left, Autumn, and we're coming up on an hour. So let's do the last 2, and then I think that's enough.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, so this one goes, in style, story, description, etc. Would a piece of work change if you switched roles in your co-writing?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
But I'm not sure I could pinpoint how, but definitely you have, I mean, I'm more of, you do the first draft and I do sort of like my overlayer and then I do the editing, and we're still kind of working out the process. I still haven't, there's some days I got it all perfect and then there's some days I fumble with it a bit. So I'm still working it out, but I think it would be so different if we did it in reverse. I don't think it would work quite the same way.
No, me neither. It would definitely be different, for sure.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that keep in mind that Autumn is a native English speaker. I'm not, right? So switching it just makes no sense, because having Autumn doing the last touches on it is just much smarter rather than somebody who's not native English speaker trying to edit something an English speaker has written. It sort of does not make much sense to me. I think it would be pretty inefficient.
Yeah, I don't think we could do anything other than maybe me making a more in-depth plot and you writing it and then me doing what I'm still doing. And that just seems silly because we meet and we talk about the plot and we come up with it together. So why would I do it first on my? Yeah, I think it works out.
And the other
the way it has
and
to
the
work
other part
out.
is and the other part is that you quite like editing and I hate editing, so there is that as well.
That's true. So if I ever want to torture you.
Oh no, please no. Don't make me edit anything.
Okay. We'll see.
Okay. Last question. How do you know when to finish editing and put the book out?
Oh, that's when you give it to me, right? Oh.
Yes. I send it to Autumn and it's done.
So for me to answer this question, I know it's done. One, I always start with a content edit. I do a read through as fast as I can, as many chapters as I can in a day, and I have a spreadsheet, which is very organized, and Jesper should be very proud of it because it's a gorgeous spreadsheet. And I usually avoid spreadsheets.
If you
like
have to say so yourself.
Yes. Well, I avoid them like the plague, so I have to have one good one. And it's very in-depth, and once I have that, I go back and I fix the chapters that I have highlighted as these are the ones that need the most work. And then I go back and fix all the other ones. And then I go back and I run it through like Pro Writing Aid and do all those changes. And sometimes if I have chance, if I feel like there's still something missing, I'll do one more gentle fluff through. But then we send it to the editor. And then we send it to the other editor. And then they send it back to me. And I do the corrections and changes from both editors. And if I have a time, I'll read through it one more time. I do lots and lots and lots of passes. So basically, I know it's ready to be published when I'm dreaming it, eating it, sleeping it. I can recite passages from it by heart and have a whole book of quotes to the side that I can... that I've pulled out. I have often laughed when readers are like, how can you remember about a book you've written? And I'm like, do you know I have probably read this story 50 times? It's probably not that bad, but I've read the book that we're publishing at least 20 times before it is actually published. And that's when I know it's done. And the biggest joke, this is a joke I've read or seen and other people have mentioned, that when you're editing and you change something and then the next editing pass, you change it back to how it was, you know you're done.
Yeah, that was just what I was about to say, because I fully agree that obviously you need to be thorough, and that's also why we use 2 different editors to edit every book, so it goes through more people than just a single editor. And then we usually have some typos layers as well on the back end, maybe
right.
20, 30, 50 people on the back end who also goes through. So it's been through a lot of people before we publish it, but all that said, I still want to sort of post a slight warning out there that there is a time where you need to say, okay, this is as good as I can make it, and let's move on to the next book, because keep polishing and polishing to get it like 0.5% better, that's just not worth your time. So all of this comes with a warning.
Yes, there's a point of diminishing returns, which was something I was trying to email you the other day. I actually finally remembered the word I was trying to say, but there's a point of diminishing returns on that little curve where, it's taking more work than it's worth. And that's when or the other way is when your writing partner says, here's the next book for you to work on. And you're like, okay, I'm done. So the next one is going off to the editor. That's a good point.
Yeah. So I think above all, thank you so much to all you listeners for sending in these questions. I think actually this was great fun.
Yes, very much so. We might have to do this once a year or something.
Yeah, maybe. So thank you so much for your questions. And next Monday, if everything goes well, Autumn will have a great and interesting interview lined up for you.
If you like what you just heard, there's a few things you can do to support the AmWritingFantasy podcast. Please tell a fellow author about the show and visit us at Apple Podcast and leave a rating and review. You can also join Autumn and Jasper on patreon.com/AmWritingFantasy. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get awesome rewards and keep the AmWritingFantasy podcast going. Stay safe out there and see you next Monday.